Welcome to another fun, fact-filled episode of The Truth of the Times, Episode 5, The Cross in the Sky and Other Shapes. I'm your host, Vinford Sansbury. This series is dedicated to filling the education gap and leaving no viewer behind in regards to the fast-paced, information-packed film, Zeitgeist. In our last episode, we demonstrated that it's extremely unlikely that more people have adored the sun over all objects, and it won't save you from predators. In all seriousness, though, while many of the supporting statements in this film hold their weight, some of the conclusions are questionable at best, and downright wrong at worst. For those of you commenting on YouTube, a quick follow-up: I am discussing Part 1 because it comes first. That is why Episodes 1 and 2 focus on the introduction. It may not seem overtly important, but all of this adds up to the overall movement. So yes, I have a lot of catching up to do, especially with another film coming out. Exciting. So, let's waste no more time.
The tracking of the stars allowed them to recognize and anticipate events which occurred over long periods of time, such as eclipses and full moons.
Although the stars do not move individually,
At least perceivably,
they do appear to rise and set as night progresses. The full moon is pretty easy to predict. It happens about every 30 days. You don't really need the stars. But predicting eclipses requires written records generations apart. If you can somehow predict an eclipse using the almost unobservable movement of the stars, I would like to see the method. In fact, I was hoping Peter Joseph would have some sort of insightful citation. But here's what he cites from In Search of Ancient Astronomies by Dr. Edwin C. Krupp. Across the whole face of the Earth are found mysterious ruins of ancient monuments with astronomical significance. Some of them built according to celestial alignments, others were actually precision astronomical observatories. A careful observation of the celestial rhythms was compellingly important to early peoples, and their expertise, in some respects, was not equaled in Europe until 3,000 years later. That doesn't at all say that stars predict full moons and eclipses. The citation does not match the statement from the film or even reality. So, moving on.
they in turn cataloged celestial groups into what we know today as constellations.
True. To be precise, it's 55% true. The 2nd century Greek astronomer Ptolemy is responsible for cataloging 48 of the 88 official constellations in his famous work, Almagest. Other constellations were added after the 16th century. An official catalog is kept by the International Astronomical Union.
This is the cross of the zodiac, one of the oldest conceptual images in human history.
Actually, this is the zodiac, also known as the zodiac wheel or wheel of fortune. Peter Joseph is referring, of course, to that part in the middle. He mentions it again later, but we might as well start discussing this now. The original zodiac comes from about 2300 BC and was a mix of Sumerian and Babylonian constellations. It had 17 signs determined by the movement of the moon. About 1,000 years later, it was reduced to a nice even 12, and the seasons were determined by the movement of the sun through all 12 months of the zodiac. Virgo was a furrow of wheat or corn. Cancer the crab was a crayfish. The centaur was a human soldier. Aquarius was just known as the Great One. Pisces was the tail of the swallow, and the ram was a farmhand. This is the oldest known image of the zodiac wheel, from the 1st century BC, in the Temple of Dendera in Egypt, now on display in the Louvre Museum of France. No cross here. So, where did this cross of the zodiac idea come from? Let's follow Peter Joseph's sources here. Amazingly, Peter Joseph also shows this exact image, which contains no cross. And then this one, from 1825, which has no cross. And even this one from a synagogue, which isn't even symmetrical. So I did some searching for this term, cross of the zodiac, quotations. The oldest reference to this phrase I could find was in a book called Isis Unveiled Theology by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, published in 1891. But her idea of the cross of the zodiac looked like this. In 1899, Willis F. Whitehead published a book called occultism simplified, or the mystic thesaurus. According to Mr. Whitehead, the cross of the zodiac actually has 5 points and is more like a pentagram, like this. Mr. Whitehead goes on to cite an even older text, the Third Book of Magic, by Henry Cornelius Agrippa, circa the 1500s. But the term Great Cross only appears in the notes by his editor. Agrippa refers to something called almutes, an ancient Arabian method of determining the nature of spirits by making a table of Hebrew characters and drawing lines through prevailing planetary signs. If you run all the equinoxes across like so, well, you get whatever this is. In Agrippa's second book of occult philosophy, amazingly, we have come full circle to something that looks like Peter Joseph's cross of the zodiac. Except here, it is the magical seal of Jupiter. Applied over the table, well, make of that what you will, I guess. But it does look kind of familiar. Well, that's because it was the symbol of the Zodiac Killer from the 60s and 70s. His tale immortalized in the movie Zodiac. More on this topic later.
It reflects the sun as it figuratively passes through the 12 major constellations over the course of a year.
This is true of the classical zodiac. It had 12 constellations determined by the movement of the sun through the sky. One might think this does not make much sense, because you can't see the stars when the sun is in the sky, which is probably why ancient Sumerians started with the moon's movements through the constellations. However, it doesn't really match up like this anymore in the western sky. In the modern western sky, the equinoxes occur here. That 13th constellation is Ophiuchus, which is one of the original constellations named by Ptolemy. Although the sun also passes through this constellation, it usually gets ignored by classical astrology and messes up the whole number 12 thing.
The term zodiac relates to the fact that constellations were anthropomorphized, or personified as figures or animals.
This is true. It comes from the Greek zodiakos kuklos, which means the circle of animals.
In other words, the early civilizations did not just follow the sun and stars, they personified them with elaborate myths involving their movements and relationships.
This is also true. The earliest reference to this is in Homer's Iliad from the 7th century BC. Let's review a bit. So far, the movie Zeitgeist has turned out to be a mix of factual information that tries to support wrong or misleading information. We can, of course, forgive Peter Joseph for failing to cite several images easily found on Google. We're not concerned with copyrights here. People who watch this film want to know how reliable this information really is. That's why citations are so important. Although the transcript has numerous citations, they either do not match up correctly or end up leading us down some dead-end street of misquoted authors who also used bad citations. So, I highly encourage viewers to follow the links I've provided and learn more about these subjects on their own. Use the methods shown here to go out and scrutinize other questionable films floating around online, which have tainted this wonderful source of free knowledge called the internet with all this bad information. Thank you for watching The Truth of the Times. Join us next time when we pick up where we left off with the Son of God concept.